Welcome everyone, join us today as we dive into the incredible life and legacy of Gregg Allman, a pioneering force in the world of Southern rock and the soulful voice behind the Allman Brothers Band. So let's dive in. Gregg Allman, born Gregory Lenoir Allman on December 8, 1947 in Nashville, Tennessee, United States of America. His parents, Willis and Geraldine Allman, met during World War II in Raleigh, North Carolina, while Willis was on leave from the U.S. Army. They later married and welcomed their first child, Dwayne Allman, in Nashville on November 20, 1946. Tragically, on December 26, 1949, Willis was shot and killed in Norfolk, Virginia, after offering a ride home to a hitchhiker. Following his death, Geraldine moved to Nashville with her two sons and never remarried. Struggling to support her children, she enrolled in college to become a CPA-certified public accountant. At the time, state laws required students to live on campus. As a result, Gregg and his older brother were sent to Castle Heights Military Academy in Lebanon. A young Gregg initially saw this as a sign his mother disliked him, but he later realized she was sacrificing everything to avoid sending them to an orphanage. While his brother adapted with a defiant attitude, Gregg felt depressed at the school. With little else to do, he studied often and developed an interest in medicine, hoping to become a dentist if he didn't pursue music. At Castle Heights, Gregg was rarely hazed thanks to his brother's protection but often endured beatings from instructors for poor grades. After their mother's graduation, the family returned to Nashville and then moved to Daytona Beach, Florida, in 1959. Gregg credited two events for sparking his interest in music: attending a 1960 concert in Nashville featuring Jackie Wilson, Otis Redding, B.B. King, and Patti LaBelle, and learning guitar from Jimmy Baines, an intellectually disabled neighbor of his grandmother. Gregg worked as a paperboy to save up for a Silvertone guitar from Sears. Though left-handed, he played right-handed like his brother Dwayne. They often fought over the guitar, but music brought them closer together. In Daytona, they joined the YMCA group the Y-Teens, their first performance group. Back at Castle Heights, they formed a band called the Misfits. Gregg soon left the academy, feeling out of place. Returning to Daytona, they formed the Shufflers in 1963. Gregg graduated from Seabreeze High School in 1965, though his focus had shifted to music and women. The Allman Brothers started meeting musicians in Daytona Beach and began jamming with Floyd Miles and his band, the House Rockers. Gregg closely studied Floyd's performance style. They eventually formed their first serious band, the Escorts, playing top 40 and R&B at local clubs. Dwayne, initially the lead vocalist, encouraged Gregg to take over singing. They spent all their money on records to learn new songs and performed constantly, with Gregg even missing his high school graduation for a gig. Inspired by Nashville's R&B station WLAC and artists like Muddy Waters, Gregg's musical style evolved. To avoid the Vietnam War draft, he intentionally shot himself in the foot, as a way of getting out of it. The Escorts evolved into the Allman Joys, the brothers' first successful band. After a strong local summer run, they toured the Southeast in fall 1965, starting with a 22-week stint at the Stork Club in Mobile, Alabama, followed by several weeks at the Sahara Club in Pensacola, Florida. Gregg viewed Pensacola as a pivotal point in his life, where he honed his stage presence and received his first Vox keyboard, learning to play it on tour. By the next summer, they recorded several songs in a Nashville studio, aided by an abundance of drugs. Though Gregg later disapproved of their release as early Allman in 1973. Tiring of cover songs, he began writing originals, and in spring 1967, they performed in St. Louis with Johnny Sandlin and Paul Hornsby. Considering disbanding, they were persuaded by Bill McEwen, the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band's manager, to relocate to Los Angeles, who provided the funds for the move. In June 1967, Gregg's band signed with Liberty Records and recorded as The Hourglass, a name suggested by producer Dallas Smith. They found the recording process uninspiring and felt constrained by commercial pressures but needed the money. Despite their debut album's release in October, they refused to play its songs live, preferring blues sets. Liberty limited their gigs to one per month, and after lineup changes, they released Power of Love in March 1968, featuring more of Gregg's songs but still feeling restricted. The band disbanded after Dwayne clashed with Liberty executives, who threatened to freeze their recording rights. Gregg stayed to fulfill a solo album deal, which drew criticism from the band. Meanwhile, Dwayne began sessions at Fame Studios and formed a new band in Jacksonville. Inviting Gregg to join in March 1969, Dwayne's new band marked a turning point for Gregg, feeling like he belonged to something again. The Allman Brothers Band relocated to Macon, Georgia, where they formed a tight-knit bond, spending long hours rehearsing, experimenting with psychedelic drugs, and socializing in Rose Hill Cemetery, a place where they found inspiration for songwriting. Alongside Gregg, the band featured Duane Allman, Dickie Betts on guitar, Berry Oakley on bass, and Jimoe and Butch Trucks on drums. They reworked blues classics like Trouble No More and One Way Out, while exploring extended improvisational jams. Gregg, previously struggling with songwriting, emerged as the band's primary composer, crafting iconic tracks like Whipping Post and Midnight Rider. Despite their efforts, their debut self-titled album released in November 1969 on Atco and Capricorn Records saw poor sales. Undeterred, the band embarked on an extensive 1970 tour, playing more than 300 shows, which gradually built their fan base. Their second album, Idle Wild South, came out in September 1970 but also faced limited commercial success. In 1971, the Allman Brothers Band's fortunes changed as their earnings doubled. Realizing their live performances were irreplaceable, they recorded album, At Fillmore East, released in July. The live album peaked at number 13 on Billboard's top pop albums and went gold by October, marking their breakthrough. Despite newfound wealth and success, the band and their entourage battled drug addiction, initially agreeing to quit heroin but struggling with cocaine. Gregg's final conversation with brother Duane ended in an argument over cocaine. Gregg took some of his brother's supply and later lied about it when confronted. Reflecting on this moment in his memoir, My Cross to Bear, Gregg lamented, "I've thought about that lie every day of my life. I told him that lie, and he told me he loved me." On October 29, 1971, in Macon, Duane died in a motorcycle accident. At his funeral, Gregg performed Melissa, his brother's favorite song. Reflecting on his loss, Gregg struggled with finding inspiration to write music again. The band took time apart to cope, while their album, At Fillmore East, soared in popularity. Gregg later wrote in his memoir about coming to terms with Duane's death. "After my anger subsided, I prayed for his forgiveness and realized my brother lived life to the fullest. I haven't fully moved on, his loss stays with me every day. Learning to grieve meant growing up and accepting that death is part of life. Now, I talk to him in the morning, and he answers me at night. Embracing his death has been my grieving process." After Duane's death, the band decided to continue on. They returned to touring and completed their third album, Eat a Peach, during the winter. Gregg found solace in the music-making process, saying it brought them all back to life. Released the following February, Eat a Peach was a hit, reaching number 4 on Billboard's chart and going gold. Despite their hardships, the band purchased 432 acres in Juliet, Georgia, for relaxation. However, tragedy struck again in November 1972 when bassist Berry Oakley, who was still visibly suffering from the death of his friend Duane, died in a motorcycle crash. Gregg reflected, "As upset as I was, I felt a sense of relief knowing Berry's pain had ended." The band decided unanimously to continue, adding Lamar Williams on bass and Chuck Leavell on piano. They started recording their next album, Brothers and Sisters, with Dickie Betts taking a leadership role. Meanwhile, Gregg Allman began recording his solo album, Laid Back, causing some tension within the band. Both albums were released in late 1973, with Brothers and Sisters solidifying their status as one of the top rock bands of the 1970s. The hit single Rambling Man soared to number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100, marking their biggest success. Despite their commercial triumphs, internal tensions and drug issues plagued the group. By 1974, they were earning $100,000 per show and had acquired a lavish Boeing 720B plane, which Gregg Allman believed marked the beginning of the end. Band tensions heightened due to drug and alcohol abuse. Gregg's new relationship with Cher in January 1975 brought more attention to his celebrity than his music. The recording sessions for their album Win, Lose or Draw were chaotic, resulting in a poorly received release that the band were embarrassed by. Despite a successful tour, Gregg's involvement in a drug trial, where he testified against their security manager Scooter Herring, who was arrested and soon convicted on 5 counts of conspiracy to distribute drugs. Bandmates considered Gregg a snitch, resulting in accusations of betrayal and death threats. The band stopped communicating with Gregg, leading to their ultimate breakup. Members pursued separate projects. Chuck Leavell, Lamar Williams, and Jimoe formed Sea Level, Dickie Betts created Great Southern, and Gregg founded the Gregg Allman Band. Gregg married Cher in June 1975, but their marriage quickly fell apart, with Cher filing for divorce just 9 days later due to Allman's struggles with heroin and alcohol, finding it too much to handle. They reconciled when Cher became pregnant with their son, Elijah Blue, born in July 1976. Despite living in Hollywood as tabloid fixtures, they would later divorce in 1978. During their marriage, Gregg released his second solo album, Playing Up a Storm, with the Gregg Allman Band. He also collaborated with Cher on an album called To the Hard Way, which was a commercial failure. Their joint tour in Europe was marred by mixed crowd reactions and frequent fights, prompting Cher to cancel it. After their divorce, Gregg returned to Daytona Beach, where he indulged in partying, dating, and touring with the Nighthawks, a blues band. The Allman Brothers Band reunited in 1978, each member motivated by their own reasons, including dissatisfaction with how things ended, missing each other, and financial needs. Their reunion album, Enlightened Rogues, released in February 1979, saw modest success. Managed by Steve Masarski, they signed with Arista, who aimed to modernize their sound, yet drug issues persisted, especially for Betts and Gregg. Despite efforts, internal tensions grew, leading to lineup changes and disappointing albums like Reach for the Sky in 1980, and Brothers of the Road in 1981. The band split up again in 1982, with Gregg reflecting on the period as tumultuous and personally challenging. Gregg spent much of the 1980s in Sarasota, Florida, struggling with a severe alcohol dependence, consuming at least a fifth of vodka daily. He faced legal issues, including a DUI arrest, and felt a fear of being forgotten amid the decline of Southern rock and rise of electronic pop music. Despite these challenges, he reformed the Gregg Allman Band and toured extensively nationwide. He also tried to reconnect with his children during this tumultuous period. By 1986, tired of financial instability, Allman proposed a co-headlining tour to Dickie Betts, marking a quasi-reunion of the Allman Brothers Band. After recording demos, he signed with Epic Records and released his third solo album, I'm No Angel, in 1987, which sold well with its title track becoming a radio hit. His next album, Just Before the Bullets Fly in 1988, didn't match its predecessor's success. In the late 80s, he moved to Los Angeles and married Danielle Galliana during what he called a midlife crisis, starting with an overdose. Allman ventured into acting in 1989, enjoying his role in the crime drama Rush. The Allman Brothers Band celebrated its 20th anniversary in 1989, reuniting for a successful summer tour with Jaimoe back on drums. They returned to the studio with producer Tom Dowd for 7 Turns in 1990, which revitalized the band with hits like Good Clean Fun and 7 Turns on the rock charts, bolstered by Warren Haynes and Alan Woody joining the lineup. After reforming, the Allman Brothers toured heavily, rebuilding their fan base and enjoying renewed success. They added percussionist Mark Quinones and released 2 albums, Shades of Two Worlds in 1992, and Where It All Begins in 1994. Allman's youngest daughter, Layla Brooklyn Allman, was born in 1993 during his time in Novato, California. His journey included overcoming alcohol and substance abuse, catalyzed by watching himself back during his troubled induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1995, where he was highly inebriated. This experience prompted Allman to finally quit drinking with the help of in-home nurses, reflecting later in his autobiography on the importance of quitting before it was too late. During the 1990s, Gregg lived in Marin County, California, enjoying time with friends and riding his motorcycle. He quietly released his 5th solo album, Searching for Simplicity, in 1997, reflecting his quest for a simpler life after overcoming substance abuse. Despite personal progress, tensions in the Allman Brothers Band resurfaced. Members departed, new ones joined, and internal disputes centered on Dickie Betts' dominance. The band faced legal battles with Betts and mourned the loss of bassist Alan Woody in 2000. Stability returned when guitarist Warren Haynes rejoined in 2001, marking a new chapter for the band. In 2000, Allman settled in Richmond Hill, Georgia, on 5 acres along the Belfast River. The final lineup of the Allman Brothers Band was highly acclaimed, releasing their well-received studio album Hitting the Note in 2003, which Gregg co-wrote with Warren Haynes. They continued to tour extensively, drawing large crowds and maintaining their status as a top touring act throughout the 2000s. Their 40th anniversary celebration at the Beacon Theatre in New York marked a highlight before their final concerts in 2014, following the departures of Haynes and Derek Trucks from the group. Gregg faced health challenges in his final years. Diagnosed with hepatitis C in 2007, he attributed it to a dirty tattoo needle, leading to liver tumors discovered in 2008. After a successful liver transplant in 2010, he became an advocate, headlining campaigns to raise awareness about hepatitis circa. The Allman Brothers Band also played benefit concerts. His album Low Country Blues in 2011 achieved his highest U.S. chart position. Allman battled health issues, including lung surgery in 2011 and rehab for addiction in 2012. His memoir, My Cross to Bear, was released in 2012, and in 2014, a tribute concert honored his career, later released as All My Friends, celebrating the songs and voice of Gregg Allman. After the Allman Brothers disbanded, Gregg stayed active with his solo band, releasing Gregg Allman Live, Back to Macon, Georgia in 2015. He received an honorary doctorate from Mercer University in 2016. Despite health challenges like atrial fibrillation and the return of liver cancer, he kept it private, still performing, though he scaled back on advice from doctors, cancelling many concerts citing serious health issues. His final concert was in Atlanta at the Laid Back Festival on October 29, 2016, the anniversary of his brother's death. Gregg would later deny reports that he had entered hospice care, clarifying that he was resting at home on doctor's orders. Personally, Gregg Allman's personal life was marked by 7 marriages and 5 children. His marriages included Shelley K. Jeffts in 1971, Janice Blair in 1973, his most famous marriage to Cher in 1975, with whom he had son Elijah Blue. He also married Julie Binders in 1979, Danielle Galliana in 1989, Stacey Fountain from 2001 to 2008, remarking on their out-of-sight years together. In 2012, he announced his engagement to Shannon Williams, marrying her in February 2017. Allman reflected in his memoir, "Every woman I've ever had a relationship with has loved me for who they thought I was, maintaining contact with only a few ex-wives including Cher." His children included Michael Allman, Devin from his marriage to Shelley K. Jeffts, Elijah Blue from Cher, Delilah Ireland from Julie Binders, and Layla Brooklyn from a relationship with Shelby Blackburn, reflecting the diverse paths of his personal and family life. Sadly, on May 27, 2017, Gregg Allman passed away at his home in Richmond Hill, Georgia, from complications related to liver cancer at the age of 69. His funeral was held on June 3 at Snow's Memorial Chapel in Macon, attended by former bandmate Dickie Betts, ex-wife Cher, and former President Jimmy Carter, among others. As reported by Rolling Stone, mourners dressed casually in jeans per Allman's request, while hundreds of fans, many wearing Allman Brothers shirts and listening to the band's music, lined the funeral procession route. He was laid to rest at Rose Hill Cemetery in Macon, beside his brother Dwayne and fellow band member Berry Oakley. Before his death, Gregg recorded his final album, Southern Blood, with producer Don Was, at Fame Studios in Muscle Shoals, Alabama. Released on September 8, 2017, it received critical acclaim. And there you have it. Thank you for joining us in celebrating the life and legacy of Gregg Allman. His music will continue to inspire and resonate with fans around the globe. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more tributes to legendary musicians. Take care and bye for now.